Hi, I'm Minister Lacreta Johnson, and welcome to It Takes a Village. Today we have Mr. Greg Waties here with us. He's our church's financial advisor, and he has some tips to help us as the new year comes in. I had asked him some questions about things that we should get ready for in the new year, and he's here to give us some advice. Mr. Waties.
Thank you, ma'am. Everybody, glad to be here. And today I'm here, as Mr. Lacreta spoke about, to just give you some information, share some of my personal experience and things I've learned over the years. I'm 58 years old, and I've been in the finance field for many years. And again, I want to make sure that you're successful and pass down that wisdom that I've received from my father, my mother, and other relatives. Mr. Lacreta talked about planning for next year, and I made some notes to make sure I don't miss anything. And one of the things that we want to talk about for planning is, what exactly do you really want to accomplish with your finances? No one can tell you what that is. That's something that you have to make a determination of. And when you're thinking about that, think about what mistakes that you've made over the last year that have held you back from getting to where you want to be, and make notes so that you don't do the same. And that's what I do, by the way. My father taught me, he said, do a year look back. Look at it and see where you were successful with your finances and where did you miss? And then just make a note saying, I'm not going to repeat that miss. Another thing to do is to increase your financial knowledge. Make a commitment to yourself. Right? Again, these are a lot of things that you can do for yourself. Learn about what a FICO score is and what that means. It's interesting because a lot of times you hear terms and you can Google them. So I'd say look them up and get to know that your FICO score can be anywhere from 300 to 850. And just to get a good loan, you really need to be about 690, 700. So there's things that, again, that you can look up for yourself. Get a financial mentor. I've always had a financial mentor. I hang out with people that know more than I do. Some people think I know a lot. The people I hang out with know a lot more than I do. And I listen and I ask questions. And again, use the internet, use the power of the internet and look things up, and you'll be able to get a lot of great information. This is something I joke about, but it's true. Stop listening to broke people that don't know what they're talking about.
I like that.
Yeah, Mr. Green, we have a lot of people that are listening to people that, one, have not been successful financially. And here's the thing. When I mean broke, there's times, if you look at the biographies of a lot of the folks who've been successful, people go through different times. They have their ups and their downs. Right. But there's some people that just don't know a lot about finances. Stay away from those folks. And then to close on that, stop loaning money to people. We had a saying in our family, which is, if you don't have it and you can't gift it, don't loan it. And here's why that's so important. As a lot of you are getting started on your serious financial plans, you'll have times where family members and friends come up and say, hey, listen, can I borrow money? And if you don't have financial discipline, your saved money is going to get loaned out and it's going to put you in a bad spot. So I'm not saying don't help people, but just make sure that it's not going to hurt you in the process. And I think that's really important. Oh, and the last thing also, make sure you're not enabling someone to hurt themselves financially. You'll have some friends or family members that are, I'll say, what term am I looking for? A little loose with their finances, maybe a little bit undisciplined, and they live that lifestyle. And they're making money too, by the way. And they'll come to you and say, hey, listen, I'm a little short this month, when really they need to tighten up their finances and not take money from you.
Right.
And so sometimes we feel better about ourselves when we help people out, but we're really enabling them to continue bad behavior that's going to hurt them long term. And so there comes a time, and I had to do this with my brother. If he's listening, he's going to start smiling, but he had asked me for some stuff, and I told him that I needed to see his finances and see where he was bleeding. And he was overspending. And I said, if you make some cuts, you probably don't need me. And he said he wasn't going to make any cuts. And I said, well, if you're not going to make a sacrifice, I'm not going to make a sacrifice.
Right.
And so ultimately he made the sacrifice. And now when we talk, he said that was the best thing I've ever done for him, was not give him the money, because now his finances are tighter than ever. And that was a couple years ago. And by the way, he was mad at me. And but now, I mean, he sends me text messages all the time. We're close. And that's the other thing. I don't call it tough love. I call it more really looking out for the person, because we don't want to enable our relatives to do things that are going to hurt them in the long term.
Right. I like that saying you used earlier. If they're not good with their money, they're not going to be good with yours.
Yeah, that was my father's saying. If someone is not good with their own money, they're going to be horrible with yours. And I found it to be true. I mean, at the age of 58, and by the way, everybody, I've made mistakes. Don't think I had this thing all together. I've learned from the mistakes, though, and I've loaned money to people that were horrible with money. And what I should have done is help them get good with money, and then they don't need me anymore. Right? They can do it themselves. And the other thing is, it's generational. If you're not good with money, you may pass that on to your kids, or your kids may have unrealistic expectations. And the other thing is, what is money? Money is a tool. It's just a piece of paper. Money's not good or bad. It's in the hands that it's with that makes it either work good or do something that's bad. So I try to tell people, if you look at money as a tool, what do you do with tools? If you have tools, you go to the tool shed. You have to clean the tools. You have to care for the tools. You have to know when to use the tool and which tool to use and when not to use it. But you have to really understand it. And that's why I say to folks, try to get as much understanding about money and finance as you can. Don't just think of it as a piece of paper that you get because you go to work. Because if you understand what money can do, money can change people's lives. And if you amass enough, you can really serve and help people. But if you... And my brother used to say this, and my father said this as well. If you don't make your money accountable, it's going to fly away. Right? If you don't attach your money to something, it'll go. And that's why budgeting becomes so important. Because you had said, what's the situation with budgeting? And I think budgeting is one of the most important things you can do, because you start assigning money to categories. Big business does that. Churches do that. But I do it in my life. And the most successful people I know all have a budget. And what you'll do is you'll look at all the areas where you have to spend money and all the areas where you want to save money. And you'll look at your assets and your liabilities. So if you have credit cards, you write all those credit cards down and what you owe on those and what you pay monthly, and then all of your income streams. So if you drive for Uber, if you have your regular job, if you're cutting grass, whatever ways you're getting income, and then you put all the line items on a piece of paper. So you put all the things where your income is coming in and all the places where it's coming out. And then you can take a look and see, are you in the red or in the black? And those terms are more terms that are used by accountants. When you hear something in the red, that just means red ink. That means negative. You don't want to be in the red. That's negative. In the black is black ink, and that's positive.
Another thing that when I started doing a budget, because I haven't always done a budget, but when I started doing my budget, it also made me realize the places that I overspend in things. It makes me look at my spending pattern.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, it helps you plan too. It helps you look at it and say, if I have too much credit card debt, how am I going to whittle that down? Because a lot of times, a lot of people don't know how much is coming in and how much is going out. And so that lets you get what we call a baseline, a place where you can start from. And the other thing about a budget is you're going to need to have what I call budgetary discipline. That means if you say that you get your paycheck and you allocate monies to pay different bills, and then you also say how much you're going to save, because a lot of times people don't put savings in their budget. Right? You have to put down, and I tell people at least 10% of your budget should go to you. I saw a program years ago in the 80s, and they said there was a rule, it's called the 80-20-20 rule, and that is 10% goes to your church or charities that you want to support that can help people, 10% goes to you, and then 80% goes into your expenses. So you're going to be saving 10% of your salary for yourself every month. And that's an important piece. And you don't want to break the discipline. Because one thing I hear a lot is, well, what about if my family members need money? Right? And that's a tough question, because we all have family members that come on hard times, but you have to make a decision. Are you going to stick to your budget?
I hope my children are listening to this.
But it's so true, because here's the thing. A lot of times what we'll do is we will give people money because it makes us feel better about ourselves. but it doesn't really help them.
No.
All it does is prolong them another month. Like I had a friend years ago who was about to be evicted, and he owed a lot of money on his credit cards, and he turned around and said, "Can you help me for this month?" And I said, "I'd rather have you just go belly up, go bankrupt, file bankruptcy, and start from scratch than give you the money, because all it's going to do is prolong. I'm going to give you the money. I'm never going to see the money back, and all it's going to do is prolong something for you. So let's work a financial plan out for you." And so we did that. And I think another part that comes up is what are common mistakes when people do their budgets? And the first thing is they don't do a budget.
Right.
There's a lot of Americans out here that do not have a budget. So that's a mistake. Lack of financial discipline and not having all the categories on there. But the other thing is, again, how much do you want to save? And the big thing is an emergency fund.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that I learned years ago. My father called it a shoebox fund. You know, some of the old grandmoms used to have that coffee can fund.
Right.
And that's where you put money away and you don't tell anybody about it. Because one thing I found out is if you tell people that you have money, they're going to find a way to try to get it and spend it.
Right.
Right. And by the way, if you get a tax return, don't tell anybody. Don't tell people about your emergency fund. I knew a guy who was walking around telling his family, "I'm getting a $2,000 tax return. I got $1,000 saved in my emergency fund and all this other stuff." And what happened? Everybody came to him and said they want the money, right? Because this is what happens. So I tell people, don't broadcast how much money you have. Keep your salary to yourself. The only people who know how much money I make is my employer, my accountant, and my wife. I don't even tell my family how much money I make, right? I do not tell them. They don't need to know.
Right.
And people will press up and say, "Minister Lacreta, how much did you make last year?" Say, "Sorry, it's none of your business. That's my personal business." And I think that's okay, because I don't ask people how much they make. Right. I focus on how I can maximize what I get. But that emergency fund is so important, because some people call it a rainy day fund. Things are going to happen. Things break down. Your car breaks down. Appliances break down. Things happen when you need emergency money. Just start putting some money away, and that may be part of that 10%, but it's not touchable. So if someone says they want to go to a concert or they want to go on a trip somewhere, you just got to say no.
Right.
You just have to say no. And sometimes for us, it's hard to do that, right? As folks in the church, it's hard to do that. But you have to stick to your discipline and take care of your family.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that you had asked about was about credit scores. How can someone increase their credit score? The first thing I tell people, though, is this. You need to go to annualcreditreport.com. Again, annualcreditreport.com, and get a copy of your credit report and see where you are. I had a friend who wanted to buy a car. And I said, "Well, what's your credit score?" And they said, "They don't know." I said, "You got to know what your score is, because when you go in to get a loan, they're going to look it up." And I said, "We have to know before we go there," because I said, if I go with you and we negotiate a deal and they come back and say your credit's not good, the deal's not going to work. But I tell people, take personal ownership of your credit score and your credit report, because there may be inaccuracies on your credit report, and you can get that fixed. Right? You can write to them and say, "Please remove these. These are inaccuracies," and get proof of that. So you have to take control of your credit report and work to get your credit score up. So how can you get your credit score up? 1, get rid of all the inaccuracies. That's really important. 2, you have to have a good payment history. So if you have a history of paying late, that'll hurt you. That hurts a lot of folks. Well, it's only 30 days late or 45 days late. That'll go in your credit report. If you don't pay your gas and electric bills on time, a lot of times that goes in your credit report. If you have a credit card or a loan and you're over 30 days, it goes in your credit report, right? And then what happens is FICO, which is the Fair Isaac Company, that's what FICO stands for. What they do is they look at all the different parts of your credit, and timely payments is the number one thing they look at when they do your credit score. So if you're a person that is not paying on time, they'll say you're not credit worthy.
Right.
And so instead of getting a loan at 2 or 3%, you may have to pay 18 or 19%. I mean, if you have a bad credit score, it hurts you. So you want to get your credit score as high as possible to show them that you're credit worthy.
I like that. And another thing that I had asked about or whatever, sometimes we retire, and most of us that are retired, we're on a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And Well, I mean, I know some things that sometimes just mess your budget up on a retirement. If you're on a fixed income or whatever, and you start loaning a lot of the things that you've already talked about, and you have grown children that are working, and you start loaning money out, it just hurts you big time.
Yes, and I think one of the things that we can all do is stress to our families to make sure that they're financially fit. It's important that as leaders in our households, that we talk to the younger generation and make sure that they're financially sound, because I know a lot of people that get good jobs, but they overspend. They're not broke because they're not making money. And then think about that. Think about someone who makes $60,000 or $75,000 a year who's broke because they're spending more than what they make.
Right.
And I think the financial discipline, wanting to go on trips, buying cars, that's all great. But if you don't have financial discipline, you'll be living in what they call that red zone. And I think that's where people have to take a step back. And that's why you have a budget. See, and by the way, when you do your budget, put a line in for fun. See, a lot of people think that with the budget, it's all this restrictive stuff. No. My wife and I, when we do our budgeting, we have a vacation budget, we have a fun budget. And that works out for us. So we actually put money aside that where we can travel. We put money aside where we can say we're going to, we go to the movies. Buy movie popcorn's expensive now. That's some expensive stuff, right? That's some expensive stuff. But here's the key. It's really all in you taking control of your money. And my question for you, it doesn't matter if you're 15 or 51 or 95, are you controlling your money or is your money controlling you? And that's the key. If you can control your money and allocate your money and say, I want 10% here, 10% here, I got my emergency fund here, my tax returns here, and you're controlling your money, you'll be able to bless a lot of people and bless a lot of ministries. And sometimes, Mr. Lacreta, you talked about when the family comes to you, right? We hear it. Family and friends will come to you, especially if you start doing well, right? If you're doing well. And what happens is we have to make that determination. Can we part with the money? So if you're going to help someone, I have a rule of I don't loan money to people anymore, because I've loaned money to people in the past and they never paid it back.
Right.
And that hurts relationships. So what I do is I give them the money if I have it. If someone in my family says I'm on some hard times, we pray about it, and then I give them the money. I say, you don't have to pay me back. Because here's what happens. If you loan people money and they don't pay you back, when Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthday parties, family gatherings come, they start avoiding you. They don't show up. And again, I just find that if you can bless somebody and help them, do that. But if you look at your personal budget and you say in retirement, you're going to go to Jerusalem, and you have that part of a trip, and you're going to give to certain charities, and someone says, hey, can I borrow some money? You have to take a look at that budget. And if it's in there, you can do that. But if it's not going to fit into your budget, if it's going to hurt your budget and the money's already allocated, you have to tell them no.
Right.
And by the way, it's okay to tell people no. I was the worst person when I was younger. When I was in my 20s, I could not say no to people because I felt bad. And then I realized that there are times where I have to say no to people because, one, either I don't have the money, or two, I'm just not really helping them out. There's a time where people have to take charge of their finances. And what I try to do now is when people ask me for money, I'll say, let's look at your finances before we do anything else. Are you making a decent amount of money, and are you just overspending? A lot of times with financial discipline, the problem can be solved. But me giving them money is not going to solve the problem.
Right.
And it doesn't help them. And I look at how can I help someone long term? And folks, that's what we really want to do. It does take a village. And as we look at taking a village, that's when you get your financial mentor or mentors. That's where you find people that you can ask them questions. Look things up on the internet. But most of all, take responsibility for your finances. And if your finances are out of control, just tell everybody to stop. I know nowadays people say, I don't want to tell my kids they can't get an iPad or we can't go on vacation to Disney. Sometimes you got to stop it. And then once you stop it and get it under control, you can go to Disney every year.
Right.
But there comes a time where as the leader of your household, you have to tell your family, we're putting the brakes on everything until we get this financial piece down. And even your kids should have their budget. They should have their finances down. Start them at an early age and tell them, that the whole house is going to have a budget. And if they get their allowance or have a day job, are they putting money aside to buy a car, to pay their car insurance? What are they doing? But their money should be assigned also. Because the best part I find is how can we minimize having to get loans and actually have the cash ourselves? And then at a later date, we can talk about investing. Because what you want to do is you want to have money and be able to invest it in either real estate, you want to be able to invest it in the stock market, or any other areas, and let that money grow. And they call that passive income, because you don't have to do anything. It's just you put money into it and it grows on its own. Right. And we want to be able to do that and take advantage. And the other thing is, we want to make sure that everybody has life insurance. Right. This is something that a lot of people do not have. And then when, especially men, if you're, but women as well too now, because moms are leading in a lot of households. If something happens, a lot of times there'll be no money coming in afterwards. So there's a few couples I know where one of the spouses passed away and had no life insurance, so that stream of income was gone. So it was difficult for them to pay for college for their daughter. And one gentleman I know passed away, and his wife worked, but his income was gone, and she ran into some hard times. We had to help them pay for the funeral. And if you had life insurance, which life insurance isn't that expensive. Term life insurance is not expensive. And by the way, I don't get any kickbacks about life insurance. I just tell people get it, because it can really be helpful to have a term life insurance policy, because if something happens to you, and nothing's promised to us, right? If you have that policy in place, your family can be covered. Right. And I think that's really important. So talk to an insurance agent. You can look at different areas, but just make sure that you're covered, because one thing we talk about, especially as leaders in the household, that our families need to be covered in our lives, but also when we pass on. Right. And we have to be intentional about it. So please talk to an agent. Please get life insurance, because you want to make sure your family's covered.
Right. Thank you. I wanted to do this to make sure that we had it for the year coming in. A lot of the things that we go through, no matter what it is, at the end of the year, we're all getting finances and getting ready for the end of the year. And then the beginning of the year, you want to make new resolutions. And I feel like finances is probably one of the most heartbreaking things in our homes, and it sometimes causes all kind of confusion at home and everything. So having a financial foundation going into the new year, to me, is a very smart move. So I wanted to bring him in so that he gives us all some tips, so that we go into new 2023 with a better set as we did in 2022. That way, whatever mistakes we made, we won't make them in the same year. So that's all we have for now. And I am so happy that you joined us today. And remember, it takes a village. Thank you for joining us in It Takes a Village. Join us each first Friday of each month at 12 noon. See you next time. Peace.